Look, as someone who grew up a Republican and was a Republican, it's hard to believe it's been almost 10 years since I left the party. The conservatives, the conservative movement, right? And you can call it MAGA or whatever. They play the long game, Mary Pat. They will put money, they will put resources, they will put people, they will utilize the courts and the legislatures to do all the things they can to advantage themselves. And you brought up something, and this is I'm just curious, based on your now even vast experience. Why is it that I don't want to just pick on progressives, but Democrats or left-leaning organizations have a tougher time taking the long view? Why is it that, because look, I'm frustrated by this myself, just as an observer of it, is why aren't there more groups like Rise who don't have to worry about funding year in and year out, don't have to say, okay, finally it's an election year, now we expect that we'll get what we need to make this stuff happen? Because as you know, as someone who's out there all day, every day, this stuff is additive, which is you're going to have a crop of kids this year. Then they're going to become, to your point, they could go work for a president, they could go work for a senator, or they could stay in their communities and become a leader there. And then that spider web effect, and 5 years down the road, you look what we built, as opposed to saying, oh my God, election day's in 9 months, right? We better get it done now. And then as soon as it's the Wednesday after election day, thanks for your service, we'll see you later. Well, I mean, I don't understand.
Sadly, I think a lot of progressive organizations would love to do that. I think the problem is the funders and philanthropists who are willing to support that work. Oftentimes, they're not willing to support the work in the long game. A lot of times, it's the moments. It's like right now, this is the moment. We want to fund things in this moment. We want to fund things. But it's like, how can we be as organized as conservatives were, even around issues like Roe v. Wade? Where it's like, this year would have been the 51st anniversary, but they played the long game, and it's like, how are we setting ourselves up in order to do that? And I think a lot of organizations would love to be able to, staff up and keep their teams year round 365, but they have to make those adjustments because the money just isn't moving. And philanthropists and, our donors move in the space of supporting things in the moment rather than continuing to invest millions of dollars continuously into something that can truly make a difference in the long run.
Right. Are you listening out there, donor community? Are you listening? I hope you're listening. Okay, because you bring up Roe v. Wade, and I want to switch to issues in a second. But when Dobbs happened, I wasn't surprised. They've been working on this for 50 years, right? But they didn't see it as just okay, yeah, we had a better campaign or we got this candidate elected, right? They're like, how do we make sure that when this happens, right, every legislature that we could capture over the course of 25 or 30 years is prepared to go into action to make sure that there were trigger laws, right? How many legislatures passed trigger in conservative states, southern states, passed trigger laws so that when Dobbs did happen, boom, right? The ban took place immediately. It went from a Friday to a Monday. It was legal, or there was some form of it. On Monday, there wasn't, right? And that's the kind of stuff that, again, I think the good news we have for us, Mary Pat, is that there are more people that believe in individual freedom, liberty, democracy, and choice, as the case might be, than not. But we shouldn't underestimate that they are out there and they're relentless. My listeners have heard this a million times. All right, so let's talk about issues, because the one thing I have heard, not only from you a little bit, but also from other youth organizers, youth advocate, youth leaders, is that you all are focused on issues, okay? And so we have President Joe Biden. He's old enough. Hell, he's almost old enough. He's old enough to be my dad if he were an older dad, but he's certainly old enough to be y'all's grandfather. So in the context of 2024, right, how do you encourage the kids that you're talking to, the students that you're talking to, the young voters that you're talking to, that you must vote A, because if you care about these issues, here's what's going to happen. How do you use the issue to drive the vote for the candidate as opposed to the candidate driving a vote for an issue?
So right now, with the demographic in which we organize around, we don't necessarily have to, say vote for this candidate or vote for that candidate. But really, it's what will drive young people to the polls are the actual issues that they care about, because they, you know, if you put either of the top candidates beside each other, they're not too far different from age. Young people, particularly, don't see themselves represented in either party. They've kind of lost hope in the two major party systems. And so what will push them is issues like debt forgiveness, which, was no surprise that the current administration announced that debt relief will actually be a major part of their campaign going into 2024, as it was in 2020, which got a lot of people to support them. But issues such as climate, such as reproductive justice, gun violence and gun violence prevention, centering those issues and like everyday people's lives. And like, you say you care about gun violence prevention. Well, did you know if you showed up to vote, not only, at the top of the ballot when you think about like the president of the United States, but even your state representative or your state senator on election day in 2024, like that will make the difference. And so what we've even seen is like encouraging young people to vote for the issues, but then also understanding the importance of like voting from the bottom up rather than the top down. And that's been the approach that's really like garnered the attention or like pushed young people to really want to show up come 2024.
Well, and I think also, as having run for a hyper local office, a local office, is that's where people's lives occur, right? Now, you can have massive life-changing decisions made in Washington, D.C., but the truth is, day in and day out, you walk out your front door, you're in Atlanta, you're in Chattanooga, wherever it is you happen to be, right? And so those local office holders can have a real impact on your individual life, whether or not your issue could be, law enforcement reform, or I know you worked on criminal justice reform, and so yeah, that's. I think that if you're going to vote for anybody, vote for your mayor, right? Your city attorney, your county council. Like those are the people that are making decision about what goes on, on your street and the street over and in the city center.
And that's also just kind of like what we've had to kind of like express to young people, even when like you're talking to young voters on the grounds and they'll bring up like their stimulus and they'll be like, well, say for example, Trump made sure that we got a stimulus. Well, was it really Trump that made sure you got a stimulus? Or was it, your Congress and your Senate? And were those the individuals who really made sure that you were taken care of during the pandemic? Or are you upset that you didn't see certain things take place within this current administration? Or was it because we didn't necessarily have, a lot of support in the House or a lot of support in the Senate? And what would that look like had we shown up in certain places in 2020 or 2022 to ensure that, certain policies were implemented? Or the fact that if we did decide to wait out in 2024, that that this particular election could have generational consequences. An example would be 2016, where we now have a very conservative leaning Supreme Court, where certain rights and liberties that you thought you'd have, you may not have anymore. And so, just sharing and showing, how elections at every level kind of directly impact you, but more so those on the state and local level.
All right. So 2 questions. One, if you had anything that sort of concerns you, what are you seeing out there that sort of gives you, a little bit of pause?
Gosh, I hate to say this, but I think right now seeing the possible support amongst young people of color to Trump as a elected official, and this is Mary Pat Hector, the person, not necessarily Mary Pat Hector, the person from, an organization, but just, I think there's this picture being painted of him as a martyr or like an individual who's being overly criminalized. A lot of young people of color see themselves in him for that reason. They see him as an individual that showed up and swooped in when they were low during the pandemic by providing things like stimuluses. And the fact that they feel like currently the courts are over criminalizing his acts and they don't understand why, he's being, why he has to have a mugshot or why he's going to jail or why he's in court. This is just an attack on his liberties. And I think this campaign is not only working for him amongst young people of color, but also really energizing his base. That is a concern for me. And beyond that, the thought that young people may be so turned off by both candidates that they don't show up, which is why I'm doing everything in my power to get as much resources as possible to begin having young people talk and touch their bases now, so that they can begin having these conversations around the issues, engaging in trainings, and like knocking on doors and building their bases now and contacting those voters 3 to 5 times leading up into an election so that they actually show up. Because if they don't, again, like beyond possibly losing some seats on the Supreme Court, beyond another 4 years of, I believe that our literal democracy is hanging in the balance. And not only this, but since 2016, not only have we seen an issue with our democracy within this country, but democracies across the globe. And I believe that we will be in for a real ride in 2024 if young people don't show up and vote around the issues.
All right, so that's the minor key. Tell me, what encourages you? What inspires you when you're out there?
What inspires me when I'm out there is the power that young people realize that they have. I remember showing up and like doing some organizing and mobilization in Wisconsin, where, prior to the 2022 Supreme Court election in Wisconsin, less than like 50 people utilized the campus polling precinct. And then that same precinct for that election had over 700 votes cast. Like small things and small moments and small wins, like a Supreme Court race in a place like Wisconsin or Pennsylvania, or a Senate race in Georgia. Like those small wins matter, and like the light bulb that goes off on young people's heads when they see like, oh wow, like my vote really did do that. Like me canvassing for 8 long months and like knocking on doors really contributed to change within my state, and how dedicated they are even following those more smaller elections from moments such as this, what we're witnessing right now in 2024.
All right. Well, this is all incredible. Where can our listeners find out more about you if you're online, if you dare to be on social media? And where can we find more information about Rise so our folks can get out there and help out?
Sure. The listeners can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Mary Pat Hector. And you can also find Rise on all platforms. Oh, I guess it's not Twitter anymore. It's X.
You're going to offend Elon? Like, don't worry about
it. You can also find our organization on all platforms at risefree.org. And you can visit our website at risefree.org.
risefree.org. As always, gang, you can find me on Twitter and TikTok, Mary Pat, at Reed Galen, on Threads and Instagram at Reed_Galen_LP, and on Substack at The Homefront. Mary Pat Hector, thanks for joining me. I hope you'll come back this year and let us know how it's going.
Thank you. I'd love to.
And everybody else, we'll see you next time. Thanks again to everyone for listening. Be sure to follow and subscribe to The Lincoln Project on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, or however you listen. Don't forget to leave a 5-star review. To connect with us, follow us on Twitter at Project Lincoln, and for more information on our movement, to join our mailing list, subscribe to our newsletter, or make a contribution to our efforts, visit lincolnproject.us. If you want to message the podcast directly, please send an email to podcast@lincolnproject.us. And if you want to personally join the fight to save our nation's democracy, visit jointheunion.us. For The Lincoln Project, I'm Reed Galen. I'll see you on the next episode.